Hey. Cool. Let's make sure. Cool. Zoom. Set the dates. Screen. Okay. And then here. There we are. There. Go. Okay. All right. Well, we got 4. Pretty good. So, everybody that's here, are y'all intending on hanging out to do practice sessions today? Hands in the air if you are, or hands up in the Zoom thing. Actually is, yay. Oh, in the chat, I'm gonna have the chat. What I'm gonna do. Where are you, chat? In the chat. Here? Ah, here it is. There we go. Yeah, we're gonna do a group practice. I'm gonna talk a little bit about some problem solving strategies, and then we're gonna break into groups and do some group practicing. So that you can talk out problems with each other, so that you get a chance to like practice talking out problems, because it's very different. It's harder to do, than just solving the problems alone quietly. So that's what we're gonna do after I do a little bit of talking. Cool, good. I'm gonna start, I guess, in about 2 minutes. We're still waiting for people to show up. Okay. I don't know if you can hear my mom talking in the background. Okay, good. Told her to be quiet during this one section. She's visiting me, so she's not being quiet. Start about 6:05, like right when it turns 6:05, I'll start going on about stuff. In the meantime, does anyone have any questions that they want answered? Or is there anything that would be really helpful for me to kind of dig into today? If there's anything like in your mind, you're just thinking, I wish I had somebody talk about this. All right, well, it's 6:05. Let's actually get started. Thanks everybody for showing up on time. Okay. Today we're going to talk a little bit about behavioral interviews. I'm just going to kind of briefly cover how you handle some of these behavioral interview questions. Hands in the air if you've ever gotten a behavioral interview question like one of these. All right. Cool. Sweet. Well, we're going to cover this technique, and then I'm going to dive into the valid Sudoku problem. What I'm seeing is that traversing through a two-dimensional list is it's hard, and having a little bit more practice, I think, and a little bit more guidance on how that works would be good. So I'm going to dive into this, and then we're also going to talk about the stir problem. We're going to talk about using 2 pointers to solve that problem. So if you haven't really dug into using 2 pointers to do string comparison, that's going to dive into that. So we're doing spoilers. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about behavioral interview questions. So, some more background on me. My last role, I was working as the CTO of Enki.com. I've been a CTO before that at HipCamp. I helped found HipCamp. And then, I've taught a lot of people to code, but I've also worked on some big problems. And so, I've worked with a lot of junior developers, and what behavioral interview questions are meant to do is really screen out people who haven't really developed those professional skills in the workplace, or people who aren't really sure how to handle conflict, or who don't really understand what the role of their boss actually is, right? And this is pretty common. If you haven't worked in a place before, what's the role of your manager? And, good managers are able to read through behavioral interview questions and understand where you get the ideas and what you might have learned from it. Most of the time, the people who are actually going through interviews are people who have been vetted a little bit. So you should be good as long as you stick to some of these techniques. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about was, what is the goal of this question? Why are people asking this question? Did you ever not meet a deadline? And so, what you might think is you're being asked this question to determine whether or not you meet deadlines. It's not actually what they want to know, is whether or not you meet deadlines. What they actually want to know is, do you communicate well about your deadlines? Do you know in advance whether you're going to miss a deadline? And when you know in advance that you're going to miss a deadline, how is that communication? How is it happening? And when, how far in advance do you actually know you're not going to meet that deadline? So this is meant to really uncover your planning skills. But there's a lot of questions like this, like, what do you do if you disagree with your boss, right? Where the answer is actually deceptive. And if it's your very first behavioral interview, you might have the instinct to say, well, I wouldn't maybe disagree with my boss. Maybe that's what they want. They want to know that I'm not going to question authority. But it's actually not that. There's a lot of cases in which it's totally legitimate to disagree with your boss, and that your boss wants you to disagree with them. And those cases are times when your boss has estimated that it will take you an amount of time to do something, and you think that it will take you a different amount of time. Or when your boss is not up to date on the details of a situation, like this bug is performing in this way or causing this particular problem. Maybe your boss is under the impression, that one thing is true, but, you're under the impression that another thing is true, and you need to reconcile, right? So those disagreements are totally legit, and you should definitely sometimes disagree with your boss and then tell your boss, hey, I disagree. But it's your boss's role to do stuff like set the priorities. So if they say, well, that's not as important as this, that's when you have to kind of say, okay, I don't disagree that, you know, on what the priorities of the organization are, because, you know, your priorities may differ than the organization's. In fact, they should, right? You should have your own life as your own priority, but, you know, that these questions are not meant to uncover a lack of ability to engage with authority. They're meant to uncover, can you communicate, right? And what do you do when these disagreements arise? Another one is like this difficult situation with a coworker. I've been asked this so many times at so many different jobs. And, you know, again, this question seems like it's meant to uncover people who have disagreements with their coworkers or a difficult situation, but you don't have any control over that. Sometimes coworkers are difficult. Like, people go through stuff. They go through a divorce and they're just crazy, or like, you know, they have a bad day, or, you know, maybe something real serious happens, right? You have no control over other people's lives. And so sometimes people will go through a crazy situation and they will be difficult. And that's just how it is. So knowing how to handle conflict and knowing how to recognize when someone is conflicting with you versus not actually, you know, like engaging with the situation and having a disagreement. So, you know, these situations, you have to kind of come up with times when they've happened in your life. You don't have to gloss over them. You don't have to pretend like, you know, nothing difficult ever or stressful ever happened to you. In fact, the more times something really stressful has happened to you, the better you're going to do in these interviews, because you're going to have more stories to bring forth, right? But these, you know, I know a lot of you have not, that you haven't been in a million different work environments, so maybe you don't have a lot of stories about like times when you disagreed with a boss or with a coworker, or, you know, you had a stressful situation at work. So the best case to deal with these situations is to look back at other places and just replace boss with teacher or coach or your parents, right? Or a family member who was, you know, watching you or something like that. Or if, you know, when it's like the organization, right? If, you know, this question, what do you do if you disagree with your boss? Well, it's what do you do if you disagree with something that the organization is telling you? So that can be a teacher, that can be another student who's like in charge of the after school club that you're doing. It can be anything like that. So you can kind of just replace boss with, you know, authority figure who sets the priorities. Or like coworker with another student, you know, or another like peer of any kind. So yeah, that's kind of how these questions are really formulated. They're not meant to catch you in the way that they maybe sound like they're meant to catch you. They're not meant to find out, you know, if you question authority or whatever, or if you're going to cause trouble. But they, like, what they want to know is, how do you handle situations when they arise? Not if, but when they arise. So there's a technique I like you know, acronyms, because they help me remember whenever I'm like freezing up for a second, right? And so this is the STAR technique, but there's really one in the beginning, the L, which is listen, right? So listen to the situation. Make sure that you're not matching too quickly, you know, that like you haven't categorized it as one question or another question. Take a moment after this to just sit back and kind of go, okay, so a stressful situation at work. Think of a few stressful situations or a few times where you disagreed, and try to pick the one with the outcome that where you brought the most maturity and you brought the most like communication. So yeah, that's the first part. And then describe the situation that you were in. Tell it like it's a story. Like, well, okay, so I was working at this one company where I was an intern, and my boss was, you know, also kind of new. They were only, you know, 4 years older than me, and so everybody was learning, you know. That's the situation. It gives valuable context as to maybe why the disagreement occurred, or you know, what actual situation you were in. And then also describe the task. What were you actually trying to do, right? Did you have a pull request that you were reviewing? Did you have a feature you were supposed to implement? What was it that you were given to do that the organization wanted you to do? Don't talk about like a task where you came up with an idea and you started doing it and then something went wrong with that. That's not usually what you want. They want to know about, as your boss, when I ask you to do something, what is going to happen if you're going to be late, going to be you think there's a problem and you want clarification, you want to dig into it and figure out the issue. So describe the actual task you're doing and pick something that's like what you were given to do. Describe the action that you took. So, and this is, especially if you're new to the tech industry, you don't have to have taken the correct action. You may not be able to come up with a situation where you did the right thing exactly perfectly, that you're super proud of every moment. That is actually okay to talk about, right? You don't talk about the time where you came in drunk and you yelled at everyone. That's probably not gonna look good on you. But talk about the times when you learned something, when you realized that, oh, that other coworker was really just kind of in a funk and they weren't doing anything, and then I was complaining about them, and so then they didn't like me, or something like that, right? Like, you can talk about what you didn't see, or bring hindsight into these moments, but talk about what you did and what you think about what you did. Was it the right thing or wasn't it? This shows a growth mindset, and companies want to see a growth mindset. Companies don't care that you have executed perfectly on everything, because you're a person and what you do is solve problems. So we already acknowledged there's going to be problems, and we are hiring people to solve them, right? So, so describing your action is important because it also shows your approach, right? So whatever you did in that moment, and maybe your reasoning, is super important to kind of explain. And then the result, like what actually happened based on the actions that you took. Did it succeed? Did it fail? And how do you know that it succeeded or failed, right? So yeah, the result is important, and it's important that you understand what relationship your actions had to the result versus the other person's actions. We're, as managers, we don't want people to have to pass the buck or the blame, that can be a big red flag. So if you say, well, and then, I don't know, I tried, I said that we shouldn't, do this in 3 weeks, but my manager disagreed, and then, we all failed, so it's not really my fault. Like, don't bring those stories to your interviewer, because it doesn't look super great if you're kind of bringing those stories, because it shows that you feel like your actions, you couldn't engage with the situation and make it change, and that you feel like your actions were totally fine, but not necessarily like you couldn't get a lesson out of this situation. So if the result was bad, talk about the lesson you learned, but never say, well, the result was bad and then it also wasn't my fault. You don't seem like a real, like you're going to respond to growth in that situation. So I released a module in Canvas. It's optional, but in the end of it, there's a career narrative thing. And these questions, for those of you who just joined, these questions they're difficult, especially because on the moment, they require you to think on your feet, right? And they require you to think on your feet and then suddenly like portray yourself as like a growth mindset, like a mature person that, has well-considered interaction. Like, it's hard, right? So having a couple of different stories, that usually like cover a couple of these questions is a really great strategy, right? Like, what do you do if you disagree with your boss? Oops, sorry. And have you ever handled a difficult situation with a coworker? I bet you can find a story, if you've got any stories at all, where both of these situations are maybe intermingled in the same story, right? So a lot of times, or like, what did you do? Did you ever not meet a deadline? What do you do if you disagree with your boss? Probably there's the same story in there, right? So like, come up with 3 or 4 different stories that you feel like you can show that, you know, maybe you didn't do everything right in those stories, but you understand like what you didn't do right and you grew from it, and then like the next time it happened you did your new strategy and it totally worked, right? So you know, these questions, like I've landed jobs based on my answers to these questions and then like been past the technical interview in some cases. So yeah, those were management roles, but like, you know, these are really important questions. And as a manager, I pay more attention to these questions personally than the coding questions, because I kind of think, and there's a lot of managers who are like me, I kind of think that I can train people, you know, on the job. So long as they can generally solve the problem and that they do engage, I can usually figure my way through, like if their Python syntax isn't quite up to snuff. So these questions are really more important to me as a manager. And so it bears giving yourself a chance to practice with them. We're not going to practice in this group session with these particular questions. What I want you to do instead is take a minute to look through some of the questions that are in the assignment in Canvas in the module that I just released. And then make a video of yourself, you know, talking through some of these questions. You'll probably need to make 3 videos, because like the first 2 you'll make, you'll be like, and you'll just, you know. So do this over video and then send it to another person, and Canvas will handle that. They'll just send it to somebody else who's done it, and look at there and try to give them some feedback. Being able to see from the other side is really also very key, because it helps you to understand what the interviewer is looking for and how they're looking for it. So you're looking for growth mindset, things like that. But without a chance to try both of those out, these are going to be really hard questions, and that's what makes you seem like a newbie, to be frank. Like, that's how I pick out newbies, is they don't have a lot of these stories, they don't have a good answer. If I say, did you ever not meet a deadline? They go, no. And that's their answer, like, cool, newbie, you know, that's what that tells me that. So, so coming up with an answer for some of these stories will really help you in your next few interviews. Okay, so that's the behavioral interview. Any questions before I move on to talking about the valid Sudoku problem? Just gonna pause for a moment. Nope. Okay, awesome. Okay, I found the valid Sudoku problem. Okay, so in this one, we're going to talk about a couple of different strategies. We're going to talk about iterating. We're going to talk about breaking this problem down into pieces. If you've done the tic-tac-toe group practice, you'll be able to match some of the like problem breakdown strategies. But anytime you've got a problem like this, where you've got kind of a lot of rules you've got to deal with, especially if you've got to deal with like a 2-dimensional array and you have to kind of apply different rules, and it's about relationships between positions, breaking that problem down is going to be really key. And the way that you break that problem down, the interviewer is going to be like evaluating that. So let's see. And then the other thing that we're going to talk about during this is debugging. right? So I have solved this maybe some point in the past, like a long, long time ago, but it's been a really long time. And I didn't solve it like before this session, so I could talk super confidently through it. So while I'm talking, I'm gonna pause anytime my code doesn't work, and I'm gonna ask y'all to look at it and then ask me a question that tells me where to look to find the answer. So don't say, it's on line 4, you used the wrong variable name. Say like, what's, you know, let's look at your loop, right? Or like, you know, so I want you to practice looking at, I can't come up with it like an abstract example. What I want you to do is practice asking me questions that will lead me to the answer if you see bugs. Everybody down for that? All right, cool. Cool, cool. Okay, so let's go through the understand phase. Determine if a 9x9 Sudoku board is valid. Only the filled cells need to be validated according to the following rules. And these are the Sudoku rules. Each row must contain the digits 1 through 9 without repetition. Okay, so this is a row. Each column must contain the digits 1 through 9 without repetition. Okay, so this is a column. And then each of the 9 3x3 sub boxes, so that's this here, of the grid must contain the digits 1 through 9 without repetition. Partially filled Sudoku, which is valid. So it doesn't have to be all the way filled out. Empty spaces are fine. We just have to not find duplicates in the rows. Okay, I'm going to look at this input. We know this one's true and this one's false. Okay, so true, basically this whole array doesn't have a duplicate in it. And then this and all the columns underneath it don't have, you know, a duplicate number 1 through 9. And then these three, and these three cumulatively do not have any duplicates. Okay, so that's kind of the process that I'm dealing with here. There's some notes down here. A Sudoku board can be valid, but not necessarily solvable. Okay, so I don't have to like solve the Sudoku. That's not part of the problem. We're only checking to see if this board is not already broken. Okay, and then only the filled cells need to be validated, so we don't care about these periods. The given board contain only digits 1 through 9, so there's never going to be like an H in here or anything. We don't have to deal with weird inputs. Cool, cool. And then the given board size is always 9x9. Now, this, whenever you're dealing with arrays, like positional stuff and like matrices, multidimensional arrays, that's really important to know. Because it allows you to, rather than looping over an arbitrarily sized array or multidimensional array, like you're looping over single, you know, like a fixed set of constraints. So you can do a little bit more hard coding, and that's actually desirable in these situations because it's easier to read. Okay, so let's think through some of these inputs. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just go ahead and take these inputs and put them down here. Input 1, and then input 2. I'm very creative. We know that input 1 is true and input 2 is false. Try to make these as copy-pastable as I can when I add them to rep. Okay, so now I've got this problem here, right? This problem has each row must contain the digits 1 through 9, each column, and then each of the 9 3x3 sub boxes of the grid must contain. Okay, so then what I want to do with this is I always want to just solve one part of the problem at a time, right? I don't need to think of all the possible cases and try to fit it all into one like loop or one pass. what I'm going to do is I'm just going to solve the smallest possible, easiest possible problem first. And, you know, handily, they have broken it up for me in these three numbers here. So like whenever you see this, like there's multiple rules, a lot of times, especially with like validation, you want to just write one function per rule, or like create one subproblem per rule, and then adapt that because it allows you to get a good pattern going. So that's what that's gonna be my approach here. All right, so which one do I want to start with? Well, let's go with row because row's the easiest one. So what I'm doing is I'm taking this very first row and trying to validate, do I see any repeated numbers, basically. So, okay. So what I'm going to do is actually define a function called validate row. And I'm going to pass in a board. Okay. And now I also need to know what row am I actually going to validate, right? So maybe I just want to pass in a row rather than the whole board. Because row is pretty easy. It's just like this one array. So once we've scoped this down, it's really a much smaller problem. And we don't have to worry so much about like this whole Sudoku board or anything. Really, what's our validate row problem? Well, it's determine if there are any repeated numbers within this list. Okay. And so, you know, we might have seen this problem before. For instance, the like single number problem. But what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna I'm gonna do this like the easiest possible way. So I'm gonna write in pseudocode, create a container to hold numbers 1 through 9, loop over every element in the row, if for every number, or sorry, add the number to the container. And then what I really want to do is, if you haven't seen this number before, add it to, add it to the container. Otherwise, the board like return false, right? The board's not valid. Because as soon as we find one, we need to stop, right? So, okay, now I've got validate row as like pseudocode. So I'm going to create a container to kind of hold the numbers 1 through 9. I like to do it like this. Scene numbers in the list. And then I'm going to say false for X in row. And that will give me a array that is as long as row is, however long that is, we don't care. And it'll just put false in every location. Okay, and then loop over every element in the row for element in row. Cool. If you haven't seen the number before. And so I'm going to use scene numbers to just say like if scene numbers at element, then I don't want to say like if not, because that was if you haven't seen it. So if not scene numbers at element, scene numbers at element equals true. So that's what we're doing there. And then we have our otherwise else return false. There, it isn't valid. Okay, and then false with a capital F. There we go. So now what we should do is test our validate row function. Let's see, validate row, I'll print that. And then, we want to put in this row. There we go. And now I'm just gonna make a broken row so that it should be, yeah. So this should return true and that should return false. Okay, let's run it. Cool, got a little bit of colon there. Okay, so I've got a bug here in my code. Can everybody see the bug? I'm just gonna like boink, boink, there. Okay. So who's run into a bug like this before? I saw some smiles, so yeah, we've all run into this bug before. Okay, so all right. What do you do if you're just not, okay, I'm not sure, I can't get into the list with elements, something is wrong, I don't know, I'm not sure what I should do here. Somebody help me out with a question. Like Jeopardy style. Type in the Zoom chat. That's what I'm looking for. Okay, what is the type of your elements? Well, elements, okay, it looks like, how do I know? Okay, so row is where that comes from. What are we passing in the row? Well, it's a list. That's what's in row. Oh, but every element in row, yeah, that's a string. So I can't index into an array with a string. I have to do a, you know, I have to do this, right? And I can convert like right in there, but I like this better. It's readable. I tell people to do this because it's better, it's more readable. Okay, so I'm gonna run this. Cool, must be integers or slices, not stir. All right, oh, I typed the wrong thing there. All right. Cool, it worked. Yay, we've got a new error. That's a success. Okay, invalid literal for int with base 10, period. What do we do here? How do I convert this if, you know, I'm not sure. So this is one of those times in an interview where maybe you don't remember the like library function that you're supposed to use, right? Like in JavaScript, there's a parseInt function, and in C, I think there's like another one, right? I think we even implemented one, and I don't want to implement one. So in this case, you can ask your interviewer what is the what's the list method, right? That will convert something from a string to an integer unless it isn't valid, and then it will just not return anything. Anyone you know? Anybody know it? Okay, so the question is, so sometimes we're being passed in a period here. So this question is meant to trip you up at this point, right? Like, so sometimes we're passing in a period. How do I convert this here? You know, because I could put like an if statement, if element equals, you know, like, or if element is a number, right? But word and value of, yeah, we could do that. So yeah, there's a bunch of different ways. I don't remember the thing, so I'm just gonna like kind of put a hack in here. So if element not period not equal to period, and I'm just gonna throw this in here, and that should work. Okay, so this first one though, it's supposed to return true, and it doesn't. It returns false. So what at this point, like if we get all the way through the row and we haven't like exited, we know that it's good, so we can return true. Now on a whiteboard, that would have been really hard to debug. Just so everybody knows, like this whole thing, whenever you search through and then you like filter out the invalid boards, remembering to do this like on a whiteboard, it's challenging. I often forget, and here like the IDE told me because I was able to execute this code. So if you're on a whiteboard, make sure to step through it and see where the return values are coming out. Okay, so my validate row is coming out properly, right? It's true or false. So I know how to validate a row. And now what I want to do is validate every row in the board. So I'm going to take the whole board and I'm going to say for row in board, validate row. And then I'm going to say if validate row return false. Okay, and then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pretend I'm going to write to do handle other cases to kind of make myself a note, but I'm going to just return true here, just to kind of make sure that all the like pipes are hooked up. You know what I mean? So now I should be able to check every row in the board. And so I'm going to get rid of my validate row calls here, and I'm just going to call validate Sudoku board on input 1 and 2. Gotta declare those before I use them. Put them here. There's one input 1. Yeah, we got input 1 and 2. Okay, so they both come out not good. They're false. So that seems weird, right? So, oh yeah, if not validate row. Okay. All right, so now we got another error, right? A real error that says, okay, list index out of range. So where is this coming from? Well, let's see. All right, so yeah, I think this is one that we can figure out together. Okay. All right, so the problem that I'm having with this part is that my list index is out of range. So in scene numbers, like that's the only time we're actually indexing, right? So you see this list index out of range error. This is the only place where we're indexing. So the problem is somewhere here, like line 17, okay, it's here. So why am I getting list index out of range? Okay, let's see, Jason says, are you actually getting the index or the value? So it looks like for element in row, I'm actually getting the value. But I'm looking in row. So what's row? Well, row is one of these, right? And so I'm getting the value, I'm getting 5, or I'm getting 3, or I'm getting period, right? And so the value of this is going to be 5, 3, period, etc., right? And then we check to see if it's a period, and if it isn't, we turn that number into a string, or sorry, we turn that string into a number, and so 5 and 3 will get turned into numbers, and then if it's a period, we just skip it. So why might we be out of range? Is 9 in the range? That's a good question. 9 in the range? Well, so how many numbers are in row? Well, it's 9 by 9, right? So the 9th index is going to be like the 10th place here. So that is probably what the problem is, honestly. So what I can do is maybe just shift everything over here by putting a -1. That way, yeah, like I'm gonna put a true in the very first element. So yeah, that would make sense. Let's see if that fixes it. It works, yay! Okay, so it validates this first board, but we know the second board is not right. And if we look, it looks like, okay, same as example 1, except with the 5 in the top left corner being modified to 8. So that puts an 8 in this column. So our rows function, okay, that's not working for our rows function. So validate row, let's make a validate column. So, okay, def validate column. Okay. All right, so now let's solve this problem. And whenever we solve our first problem, you know, we want to lean on our match phase because our second problem is likely to be similar to our first problem, right? Somewhat. Okay, so how do we traverse through a set of how do we traverse through a multidimensional array and get a specific column? Well, so I know that this element is 0, 0, right? And the way that if I were to go into the board, just, you know, each element would be a board of, you know, 0, 0, or really, you know, I and J, or really row index and column index, right? Because that's way easier to kind of reason about as code, right? So what I need to do is I need to go to row index 0 and column index 0, row index 1 and column index 0, row index 2 and column index 0. So it looks like in order to check a column, the column number doesn't change, but the row number changes. It goes from the top to the bottom. Okay, so basically what I want to do is I want to pass in the board and the column. This is one way to do it. So that makes my API very different with validate column than with board. But that's okay, you know. So how do I loop over this and then get the same like column each time? Well, what I'm going to do is just put column index in here. And then I know that I'm going to increment row index. So, you know, to put it in pseudocode, for every row in the board, like, yeah, check to see if you have seen the number before at the appropriate column index. Right. So okay, and like, let's see. So I needed that container, create a container. So I can kind of like copy this, right? And then I know that instead of looping over every element in row, what I'm gonna do is loop over the range from 0 to 9. And then, let's see, for row index in range. So, and then what I want this to become is the element. And so, kind of like I did before where I created an extra variable, even though I technically don't need to create an extra variable, it's a lot easier for me to really adapt my code here by just creating an extra variable. Pro tips, in the compiler does not actually provision another variable here whenever you do this. It just goes through and replaces every element of a singly like interpreted value with the value of that. Like that's what the compiler does as a first pass because it's faster. So like making these little extra variables that help you as labels, they're not bad and they don't add to your space complexity. It only really counts if you're taking some portion. So this practice really helped us reuse this validate column thing, right? It's pretty pro tips. But you know, we can't do like, you know, false for x in row. So I'm just gonna go range 0 to 9. So there we go. Okay, cool. So I'm just gonna try to see, you know, that's for row and board, and so we're just checking that. And so for column index in board, right? And then I'm going to pass in the board, or sorry, yeah, in board. And then I'm going to call validate column. And I have to pass in board and column index. Validate column, board, and then column index. Right? Okay. I'm going to try running this to see. Oh, no, it returns true or false. So if not validate row, or no, sorry, if not validate column, return false. Okay, so now I'm going to run it, and it's going to freak out of me and say, you can't pass in a list. What are you on about? Okay, so list indices must be integers or slices, not lists. All right, what am I doing wrong here? line 29. Who can see what's going on? Good question. My original method call, what parameter am I passing through? Oh, yeah, I'm passing. Oh, I can't just copy and paste from up there. Okay, what I really needed to do was, I need to just loop over the range of 0 through 9 there. Good catch. Thanks, Victor. Okay, so that was great. That was a great Jeopardy call. Okay, so we've created 2 inputs. We know that the second one is false because we should have a repeated 8, and we got true and false. That means we're done, right? No way. We've got to do that third one. Okay, so I didn't give an example of a valid/invalid third one, so I'll just copy this. I'm going to change this back to a 5. Yeah. And then what I want to do is basically within these, let's see, there's an 8 here. And so this should be invalid. So I'm going to do input 3 here, and then we got to call it. Let's see. And, all right. Cool. So, all right, so input 3 is invalid, but only because of this and not because there's any like other broken ones, right? Let's make sure with our eyes, best, no extra 8s, rows and lines. Okay, cool. So yeah, so this one has 2 8s and should be invalid because of that and not because of this other thing. Okay, so now what I need to do is create another, oops, don't need that. So yeah, now what I need to do is create another way to check, right? Now, before, what I did was I looked over every row in the board. And then the next thing that I did was I looped over every column. But what I did here is more hard-codey than the other one, right? Like I wrote range 0 to 9 rather than range of the length of the board. Okay, so you know, yeah, it won't handle like arbitrary length Sudoku boards, but like we know things about the solution, right? We know that it's going to be 9 by 9, period, the end. So what we can do is we can do some hard coding of some stuff, right? Now this one, it starts to get a little bit more complex, right? So we know there's one set here that's 3 by 3. So it's 3 across, there's 3 chunks across, there's 3 chunks down, and then there's like, you know, so if we kind of like think of our board in like groups, right? It's 0 through the 3rd index inclusive down to the second, no, sorry, the 0th index through the 2nd index inclusive through the 0th row through the 2nd, So I'm just going to write kind of down like what are all these indices, right? So yeah. So if we look at what is a like mini matrix, it's let's see, it's like 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, right? And then we do that 3 times, and it's 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2. But we can't write all of these out because, you know, like it's going to be like 3, 4, and 5, right? And so we can't just write them all out. But we do kind of have like, from this first one, we can kind of think of this set as like a series of offsets that we can reuse, right? Because if we were to kind of go over here to this third one, and now we're on like, this is 3, we know that we will always have to add 0 to 3 to get the correct one. And so we just need to know kind of where like the corners of the boxes are so that we kind of have a start place, right, to kind of measure out from. So, yeah, so I'm gonna say dev, let's see, validate box. Cool. And then I'm gonna have to pass the board in. And then I'm gonna say left, let's see, top left. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go with the top left corner as like the start place, right? So top left corner, top, or sorry, yeah, and then corner X, top left corner row, top left corner column. Cool. Okay, so this is my thing. That's my API. Whenever you're doing interviews and you're trying to break these things down, what's helpful is sometimes if you just imagine that this is done, like it magically works, and then you kind of go up here and you try to handle, how am I going to pass things into it? So what I'm going to do is pretend like this function works, and then I'm going to try to figure out how to pass things into it here. And then I'll go back and, you know, I'm just going to say like return false. It's all broken. Do not reload. No. Yeah. Threatening me with reloading. Okay. Anyway, all right. So how am I going to get the top left corners? Well, I know there's 3. So I know that the top left corner is 0, 0, and then I know there's one at 0, 3, and then I know there's one at 0, what is this? Let's see, 9, 8, 7. So 0, 0, 0, 3, and then 0, 7. Cool. And then I need to go down, and so this is 3, 0. There we go. 3, 3, and 3, 7. Cool. And then 7. All right. So 7, 0. 7, 3, 7, 7. All right, cool. So I've kind of got these 3 different like loops that I need to get these numbers out, right? Those are the corners. I've identified them and I wrote them out. This diagram, you know, you notice we're having to go through the understand and pseudocode phase over and over and over again, right? But we kind of don't have to like go, you know, crazy each time and make all these things. Just these little diagrams really help me, right? Because I can see that I only need the numbers 0, 3, and 7, right? So I need to have sort of like, I could kind of, the easiest way is to just have 2 loops that loop over 0, 3, and 7. So for let's say, what is it? It's going to be it's the row index followed by the column index for row index in 0, 3, 7. For call index in 0, 3, 7. Cool. So now I don't have to do any fancy tricks. I don't have to like figure out how to express that as like a weird like skip properly thing. I could, who cares? Would starting at 7 cause a out of bounds error? Hold on, let's see. Would starting at 7 cause an out of bounds error? So if we start at 7 and we go, let's see, well, I don't think starting at 7 will cause an out of bounds error. I mean, given that I'm just going to add 2 to it, and then we're going to get to 9. So I guess it's 6. Yeah, we'll start at 6. Well, no, wait, hold on. 3, 4, 5. Oh, I'm not right. You're right, I am wrong. So let's go with 6. Numbers. Did I count wrong? Yeah. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, you're right, it's 6. So did you see me not count there and think that it was 7? Because it should be 7, right? It should definitely be 7. But not counting. I didn't count. I didn't. You gotta do that. You gotta. Would have saved me. You just saw it saved me. So, okay, so yeah, that should do it. That should do it. If not, validate say box board row index column index. Okay, cool. Now let's see what else. What was the other way? False. False. So now our pipes are done, right? Like our pseudo logic on the top is done. And as long as I am successful in making this validate box function work, we can move on. Okay, so let's make this box function work. So if we, let's see, return true if we never find anything wrong. And so I need to get from 0 to 2, and I need to get from 0 to 2 again. And I know that I want to use offsets, basically. So how do I test this here? Well, this is very similar. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste it in here. And then we're going to kind of just figure out how to adapt this, right? So, so top left corner row, let's see. So I want to loop over the row index, and I also want to loop over the column index. So for column index in range. And I don't want to go 0 to 9. Let's see, what do I want to do? I just want to go over these 3. So I'm actually just going to go 0 to 3 and 0, 2, 3. And so this will give me 0, 1, 2, right? And now, so these are not my row indices, though. These are my row offsets and my column offset. Okay. And so now my row index is the top left corner row plus the current row offset. My row, my column index is the top left corner column plus the column offset. okay? And then the element is the board at row index and column index. Otherwise, that scene numbers filter that I made, pretty much the same thing. If the elements, you know, we're still doing the same exact thing. So let's see if that works. Okay. All right, let me just run it. True, false, false. Okay, so it works, pretty sure. Let's come up with another one of these. I'm gonna take this input that was true and then just like perturb it so that it isn't true. So I'm just gonna put a 5 here. I'll put this input 4 just to make sure. Cool. True, false, false, false. But if we, you know, get rid of it, so there's not like a 6 in this column. Cool. Oh no, there's one right there. 7. Oh no. Okay, that's a bad one to try to perturb. It's not a 7 in this row, so put a 7 here. Cool. Okay, cool. This is a good board. Excellent. Okay, so it looks like we've solved our problem, right? We've got all 3 issues resolved. And so, you know, how are we gonna improve this? Well, like, so we've been talking for about like 40 minutes, I think, on this, maybe 30, but it's somewhere between 30 and 40 minutes. In an interview, you have an hour, right? And like, you know, this is with me having an IDE, and I can check a bunch of stuff, and like, you know, I'm fairly well versed in Python, and like I've been doing it for a while, so, you know, maybe you will make more mistakes than me, maybe not. And so when you're working on this stuff, honestly, if you get like to the point where like you've actually just finished it, that's huge, right? So there's a couple of things that we could do to like clean this up if we want. For instance, one of the things that senior developers want to see is you reuse code. And the validate row and validate column functions are basically the same except for how I'm calling them. But if I were to do something like, you know, I could probably like, here, I'll actually just, yeah. Oh no, wait, I want to do it like that. Okay, so what I could do is probably create a row basically by using a list comprehension. So row equals, and let's see, X for, let's see, yeah, X for, you know, to write this out, element in, element for element in board at, let's see, oh no, wait, I can't do it like this, or can I? I'm trying to remember. Yeah, at 0, or no, sorry, at column index of 0, right? Or column index at, sorry, yeah, you got to increment the row. I don't know if I could do this in one line. I kind of thought I could, but I can't think of how to do it right now. So, dead end there. But, you know, you could basically create your rows in here by sort of pulling them out. And that might be a better way to organize your code, because when you take a problem apart and you solve it kind of like this, right? Validate row, validate column, validate box. You can see that our API changes, and that's fine, but it makes it harder to test, and it makes it harder to keep the code really clean, and it makes it harder to reason about, right? Like, a lot of times what you'll want to do is pass in the whole board, and then have the function handle it, or lift all of that out up into your validate Sudoku board function. And so you would just be passing in these like pure lists into validate row, and you kind of reuse validate row, validate column. That would be something that I would mention in like a code review or something, if you were doing that. That's the kind of stuff that I look for. Let's see. But yeah, in terms of the complexity with a problem like this, as long as you're not using not in like validate row or validate column, like as in you're not looping over the row and saying, you know, like you're not saying like if element not in row, because if you do this, what you'll get is you know, of O of n squared solution, right? Because you're going to have to go over row over and over again to check to see that element is not in row. And so it's n squared. So don't do that. You know, we're going element by element, so it's linear. We do have to visit every element. We can't like not visit some elements. You haven't seen any sublinear algorithms yet because we haven't gotten to binary search. And that's like the main, you know, sublinear algorithm that like, that when you're like thinking about sublinear algorithms, it's basically always a search, and it's most of the time binary search is like the example they'll use. So, you know, once you get to a linear algorithm, don't worry too much about making it better than that, because there's really not that many algorithms that run sublinear. There's a few there's a sort algorithm that runs in a sublinear. It's called radix sort. It's very complicated, and it's only probabilistically sublinear. It's not like guaranteed to be sublinear. So don't worry too much about, like, once you get to linear, you're really fine. The reason we know it's linear is that, you know, we're not really like we're checking some of these numbers multiple times, but we're doing it with a different method, and their relationship matters. So it's really fine that we're checking them again. And you know that, yeah, exactly. There's no like secret hidden loops in here. We are creating a data structure that is like, so it's O of, but it's constant. It's the same size as n, or sorry, it's not constant. It's O of n in terms of space. We don't need this. We could probably do something with like bit manipulation or whatever, but I'm not, you don't really have to do or get to that phase. It's not super important. Frank sent me a great example of like rotating the board, and it is a totally great method. So if you were to like, we'll pretend, you know, rather than my board, it's this, right? Or no, wait, hold on. Yeah, you created a thing there. So this works, but again, I mean, you're going over it again, and you're creating a whole like rotated thing, and so, you know, the nice thing about this is that when you call validate row, it dimensions another array, but then at the end of validate row, that array goes away. And so you only ever have 2x your current row, really, like hanging out at a time. And that matters, you know, space complexity isn't how many overall extra variables do you create or extra like dimensions, it's how many is there at the largest point. You know, if you think of the memory it takes to run your application kind of growing and shrinking, what they want to know is what's the biggest point and how does that grow in relation to n? So this method of like breaking things up into discrete function calls can help your memory not balloon out of control. And it is like, it's not just labeling parts of the problem. You know, you really, that is a method of controlling excess memory growth that a lot of senior engineers use. So yeah, so that's a great way to rotate a board. If you got to rotate a board, like, there you go. That's, well, anyway, I lost it. But yeah, it's a great way to rotate a board. Okay, so that's the valid Sudoku problem. It's going to be a little late, and I want you all to do the breaking down problems. So I'll go over this, but I'll make another video so you can just watch it rather than just listening to me talk for another hour and a half or something. So I want you to, you know, jump into breaking down problems together. So those of you who have seen the tic-tac-toe problem, please raise your hand. Let's see, I know Ashley has, I know Victor has, Aaron has, definitely, Frank, Jason. Okay, let's see, we got Christopher Martinez, Samantha, and we've got, Victor, yeah, you've done it. Susmita, have you done the okay, you've done the tic-tac-toe problem. Okay, so there's like maybe one person who, oh no, everyone's done the tic-tac-toe problem. Okay, cool. All right, so then we will move on from the tic-tac-toe problem. Who's done run length encoding? Jason's done it. Ashley, have you done run length? Christopher's done it. Oh, yeah, the compression one, yeah. Victor, did you do run length? Okay, sweet. Susmita, I see you are idle. Have you, I'm gonna lower your hand. Raise your hand again if you have done run length encoding. You don't, I'm gonna assume you haven't. Okay, cool. So we got at least 3 for run length encoding. Okay, great. There's another one that I came up with. It's called, I like big nums. I can't lie, I like big nums. So the idea is, given an array of numbers greater than 0, arrange them so that they form the biggest number. Return that as a string. But you might get numbers like 30 and you have to keep them together. Or 34. So that's the tricky bit. Anyway, so okay. So I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna break everyone up into breakout rooms. I found the button for that. There we are. Okay. Let's go with 3 rooms. Okay. All right, Ashley, Susmita, and Victor have not done run length encoding. So yeah, so I'm going to just drop this in the Zoom chat, run length encoding. And what I want you to do is drop into this REPL. Hold on. Drag windows around. Jump into this REPL. Then hit multiplayer, click start session, and you'll notice up here, it's a very important part, it adds this part to the query string where it says live, and then it has like a little token. So you're going to want to copy the whole thing to give to the rest of the group, so you can type and everything. So this is the run length encoding problem. I'll jump in and introduce it if you'd like in a minute. Okay, and then the rest of the breakout rooms, yeah, it's gonna be one, just one. Not have more? Cool. All right, I'm opening up the room. See you in a minute.